everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video we're going to be going over a used Subaru BRZ, and we're going to answer the question of whether or not you should wait for the new BRZ or if you should get the previous generation. First and foremost though, a huge shout out and thank you to the Dodge Ram Jeep Chrysler here in Sandy, Utah for giving me some time with the BRZ. Check out their inventory link below. Let's get into the video. Under the hood of the BRZ, we have a naturally aspirated flat 4-cylinder that goes through a 6-speed manual transmission. Now, power outputs are 205 horsepower and then 156 pound-feet of torque. The new BRZ has 228 horsepower from a naturally aspirated 2.4-liter flat 4-cylinder, so there is a little bit of a power increase, but not that much over this generation. So let's just quickly go over the exterior on this BRZ, the interior afterwards, and then we'll take it out and drive it because that's what this car is mostly about, is the driving experience. So first off, I love the exterior on this generation of BRZ. The accent lights here with the front headlights look absolutely fantastic. You got the little fog light down there. I've always liked this little part that goes across, kind of, you can imagine it goes through the bumper. It obviously doesn't, but you can kind of like visualize that. This one's got the cool Subaru carbon fiber logos that the previous owner added. If you guys are wondering, this is a 2017, and aside from that, Brembo brakes from the factory. Wheels look pretty good. These ones have had a little bit of wear on them, but I mean, it's kind of expected with a pre-owned vehicle. But again, Brembo brakes, just such a cool thing. And then aside from that, I really like this accent piece right there. And then popping over here to the rear, we have Brembos in the rear as well, and the brake calipers are red, which goes perfect with this particular car. Whoever owned this just did such a cool aesthetic build on it. It looks absolutely fantastic. I love it from the side angle with all the black. And this one also actually does have aftermarket taillights, which look really good. Just look at that clean aesthetic. And then I actually really like the low profile spoiler here in the back. Notice all the badging's blacked out, and again, we've got another Subaru carbon fiber logo. And then coming down below here is the exhaust at the bottom, and then this is funny. It's actually got a little receiver hitch there. That is a funny thing to see on a BRZ. But aside from that, yeah, this car just looks fantastic from an exterior perspective. Now, quickly popping here into the interior, it's actually really nice. You get this nice leather trim here at the top with red stitching, and then you've got this right here down below, and then down below here we've got more leather trim with red stitching, and then they do carbon fiber accenting. I really like that. And then even more leather over here as well with more carbon fiber accenting around the window controls. I like that little piece. And then here are the seats. So you guys notice you've got the bucket seats for the front. They say BRZ on them. Really nice bolstering. Alcantara in the center. And then yes, it does have tiny rear seats, basically just storage back there, but they've got Alcantara in the middle. These seats are manually adjustable. And then the pedals look really nice. Again, this is a manual, so that's why you got the 3-pedal layout. But yeah, there's one more look before we pop into this BRZ. Now let's quickly go over the rest of the interior on this BRZ. So we've got this nice leather wrap steering wheel with more stitching there in the center, and then again the carbon fiber Subaru logo. Yeah, it does come with cruise control. You've got the volume controls, all that on the steering wheel. Just normal practical car stuff. Voice command controls on the other side. You can see the normal stocks. I've always liked the look of the gauge clusters. It's kind of reminds me of like Porsche's gauge cluster, how they used to do it with the 3 different gauges with the RPMs in the center. Definitely not a bad thing to be compared to. I just think it has an overall nice look to it. And then you guys will note that this one has 37,000 miles on it, so it's actually relatively low miles for the year. And then aside from that, coming to the infotainment system, with just this generation, you actually do get a pretty decent backup camera resolution on it. It's really solid. And then as for the rest of the infotainment system, sorry, the camera doesn't really want to focus because of the sunlight. It's relatively easy to use. It's got all the normal practical stuff. You've got Bluetooth, you've got radio, all that stuff. So it has everything you need and nothing that you don't need. I've always liked this look down here. So with the climate controls, and then you guys can see all of that. It just, whenever you like, just for the dual zone climate, when you press that, it feels like you're doing something significant. And then the stop start button right here. And here's the shifter for the 6-speed manual. This transmission shifter is amazing. So first off, it's pull up and over for reverse, but it's kind of like shorter throws, and it's just super notchy into the gear, so you know exactly what gear you're going into. It just feels amazing. This is one of the best manual transmission shifters on the market. And then we've got our traction control, and then you've got this for the sport traction basically. And then notice we've got heated seats here. We're not gonna use those today. It is super hot. I am sweating a massive amount, to be honest. And then I like what they've done here, where you kind of have to lift it up for the brake. Definitely unique with that, how they did the little tab right there. More storage space down below, and then more leather trim up here, and you guys can see pretty normal glove box. And then finishing things here at the top all black headliner here. And if you guys are wondering, I'm 5'11", I've got quite a bit of headroom, so you actually can fit somewhat tall people in this car. So if you want the most up-to-date pricing on this particular BRZ, again, check out the Larry H. Miller Dodge Ram Jeep Chrysler websites in the description down below, where you can, again, see the pricing. But let's take her out and see how she drives. Talk about visibility here in the BRZ before we set off, so you guys can see visibility of the hood's really good actually. There's both the mirrors, and here's throughout the rest of the rear. And well, park and brake down, first gear, let's set off. We are setting off here in the manual BRZ, and again, I absolutely love the feel of the shifter with this. Now, something interesting to note is with the clutch feel on this, the clutch is extremely light. There's not a whole lot of feel. It just kind of like engages with the gear. You can't really necessarily feel through the clutch with the engagement. You kind of just have to watch the RPMs and just kind of be slow with your movement with that. Kind of forgot that about the BRZs and the 86s. Now, aside from that, it's pretty easy to modulate the throttle with this. I mean, this car, you could easily stall it. That being said, though, I mean, it's relatively good as long as you're smooth with the movements. I'm wearing the worst possible shoes to drive this car. The pedals are kind of small, and I'm wearing like wider shoes, and it is it is not good whatsoever. So I'd recommend don't wear wide shoes like me. Pretty easy to rev match. Definitely has pretty good middle of the line torque. You kind of have to be over 3,000 RPMs with this car, or there's not a whole lot happening. They could have at least used their turn signal, but no, they have to use the typical Utah driver driving way. I bet they're gonna turn and still not. Don't you love Utah, guys? But aside from that, let's get like a partial acceleration here. So like I said, it's got good shove in the middle, but you can kind of tell that as you get to the upper end, it doesn't really keep pulling all that much. We'll get a full-blown acceleration up here. Definitely like those Brembo brakes, though. It has good stopping power. It's a light car, so you don't need massive brakes, but the fact that it has the Brembos actually helps out quite a bit. It definitely stops a little bit better because of that. Yeah, you know what? This transmission really isn't that bad with the clutch feel and everything. Like I said, initially I was kind of like, I'm not really a huge fan, but it's not too bad, honestly. But let's get our full-blown acceleration here with the BRZ. So it's definitely not quick. The thing that's interesting is it just doesn't really, like, you get that torque in the middle, and then as soon as you get past kind of like 4,000 RPMs, where some cars will continue to pull, it doesn't really have any shove. And I mean, that's because it doesn't have that much horsepower. So just kind of understand that from a driving perspective. Pretty easy to rev match downshift with it, though. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty easy to match the RPMs. Even if you're off by a little bit, the engine's still relatively blippable. Or sorry, the engine's relatively like, smooth, I guess is a better word for it, not blippable, but the engine's relatively smooth so that it just kind of makes it work. Yes, it's pretty easy to drive if you're learning to drive manual transmission, so it actually be a pretty good car, and I love the shifter feel. But let's get into setting things up with this BRZ. So first off, I feel like the second owner, or not the second owner, the owner of this car rather, did a good job with this car. I like the aesthetic things that they've done to the car, but they've kept it relatively stock to where they've just made it look a little bit better, but they haven't ruined any of the driving dynamics with the car. Aside from that, exterior wise, like I said, looks good. I love the interior on the BRZs. The seats are nice. It actually, I mean, this is like a $30,000 car, and it actually has a pretty nice interior. I forgot to mention the steering also. The steering is pretty good. I've recently driven a Miata. I've driven a couple, and the steering on this isn't as good as the Miata steering. I will say that steering is pretty good, but it's just not in the same level as that Miata. But yeah, it's a fun car to drive. It's just not super fast, and so this is kind of like a canyon carver, especially on the downhill portion. Uphill you might have to struggle a little bit, but yeah, it's a fun car. It's a good looking car as well. It's pretty easy to drive, and I guess the nice thing about this car is it doesn't have such a massive amount of power that you can have fun legally. But the thing that's interesting is the Miata is more fun at slow speeds than this. This, you feel like you have to push it more to have fun, whereas a Miata, you don't really have to. So that's kind of interesting. And I know that they're kind of like direct competitors, but not at the same time. I understand that, because that one's a convertible, this one's not. This one just is kind of more serious, I guess, from a driving perspective. But I guess to answer everyone's question, should you go for one of these or should you buy the new one? And although I haven't driven that engine that's in the new one, right, the 2.4 liter naturally aspirated, I've driven the turbo version. It's a good engine with a turbocharger. Naturally aspirated, we'll see. I just don't think the new one's going to be that much faster, right? The power figures suggest that it's going to feel a little bit torquier on the low end, but it's not going to be substantially faster. And so what I'd have to say is this is probably gonna be the better value because it's almost as fast, it looks really good, and it's going to be less expensive than the new one. And so, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what I'd have to say is this one is great. The new one I'm sure is gonna be awesome, but I feel like it's not necessarily going to be worth all the extra money that it's gonna go for. Now that's gonna sum things up for this used Subaru BRZ. And again, a huge shout out and thank you to the Larry Miller Dodge Ram Jeep Chrysler here in Sandy for giving me some time with the BRZ. Check out the inventory and link below. I'll see all of you in that next video.